We're sacrificing our potential when we don't create the proper sacrifices that we need to in our life.
You just eliminate the ideal because that's too hard. That's too much. What's the alternative? What else do you do? You have no potential.
And I think the writers of the Bible originally, that was their goal in writing it. Like, these are all the things that humans are going to go through in their mind.
Don't kill the potential for being better. The alternative is much worse and much more difficult to deal with in the long run.
Okay, you want to read, since it's so short, do you want to read it out loud? Just read the whole thing?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we can do that. Yeah, I think for Cain and Abel, this one is pretty short. It is, I mean, a single page, really. The meat of the story is less than a single page. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, last we left off, Adam and Eve had been cast out of Eden, sent on their way because they ate the forbidden fruit and became self-aware of their nakedness and their mortality and all of that, and so they were doomed to work forever, essentially. So Adam made sweet love down by the fire to his wife Eve, and it does say that they made love, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now, okay, I'm going to abridge a little bit. I'm not going to read this verbatim word for word because there's a lot of like saith and Bible speak and shit.
Okay.
So Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. So Abel was keeping livestock and Cain was growing fruits and vegetables and such.
Okay.
Farmer. Both farmers, but land farmer. God asks them for sacrifices, and Abel sacrifices the fat portions from the firstborn of his flock, and God is very happy with this sacrifice. He smiles down upon him for it. Cain brings fruit of the land for God, and God is not satisfied with his offerings, which makes Cain upset visibly. And so God said to him, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, you will not be accepted. But if you do what is right, but if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." So basically what he's saying is, if you were doing what you needed to be doing, I would be happy with you. But because you're not, you're kind of tempting evil a little bit. It's at your door. You need to get that under control. And it's significant there, in my opinion, that he's essentially questioning God as opposed to his own actions there. He's like questioning not only his conscience, but like reality itself. Like, things are not going my way. God is not happy with me, but it's not my fault, it's God's. So Cain does not like that at all. Doesn't like being told that, like, hey, everything that's going on is on you. You're to blame. You have the power to change this, and you're not doing it. So instead of getting his act together, he lures Abel out into a field, and he kills him. At which point God comes along, and he asks Cain, "Where's Abel?" And Cain says, "What am I, my brother's keeper?" And God already knows what he's done. So
what does God specifically say there? Because I think what he says is pretty profound.
So he says, "Where is your brother Abel?" He says, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And then the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." So basically tells him that nothing that you ever try to achieve or work towards will be ultimately fruitful. Mm-hmm. You have been cursed to suffer and toil pointlessly. Probably just caused a bit of a pop. So Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." But the Lord said to him, "Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Then, this is where we start getting into the whole business where it's like 3 or 4 pages of just people giving birth. There's a little bit in between, though. So Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it Enoch after that son. Then Enoch had Irad. Irad had Mehujael, and Mehujael had Methushael. And then Methushael had Lamech. And going over this because they might come into play later. Lamech married 2 women, one named Ada and the other Zillah. Ada gave birth to Jabal. He was the father of those who lived in tents and raised livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who play stringed instruments and pipes. Also might become relevant later. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. So, we'll get back to that. Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son, named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Seth also had a son, and named him Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. So, that's the story of Cain and Abel. It's very short, sweet, and to the point. It gets right into it. Not a whole lot of buildup between... For some reason, I thought that there was a little bit more in between Adam and Eve and, like, at least Cain killing Abel.
Yeah, it's right. Gets right to the point.
Right into it. Yeah. So, is there anything that immediately stands out to you in that story?
Yeah, I think Cain gave his first crops. Is that what it was?
Cain, it doesn't even specify that it was his first crops. The exact words are, in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. Those are the exact words.
Some of the fruits of the soil.
Yeah, so he brought some fruits. It's not made 100% clear why God is dissatisfied with his offerings. But I think that the ultimate message is just that it wasn't enough, and Cain knew that. Like, he could have been giving more. He could have been sacrificing more.
Yeah, I think it's significant that the blood of Abel is soaked in the ground, and Cain is a crop, grows crops. I think that's worth coming back to. But I think the fact that, let's say that they were both sacrificing a goat. They both sacrificed the same exact thing.
Yeah.
I think in this scenario, that even that could have been, God could still be dissatisfied with Cain's sacrifice. I think sacrifice is subjective. And so, if, let's say, Abel had 5 goats and he sacrificed 4 of them to God. And then let's say that Cain has 100 goats and he sacrifices 20 goats to God. In this scenario, Abel's sacrifice is still greater.
Yeah. And we've talked about that before.
Right.
Yeah, it's about the comparison between your sacrifice and how much you have to give, not just the total lump sum of your sacrifice.
Definitely. And so in sacrifices being subjective, we each have our own sacrifices that we need to give up to our higher moral compass, to our principles, to our conscience. We have higher sacrifices to give. And Abel is like, I know I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this, Cain in a sense killed his ideal self, which is Abel. Abel's loved by everyone. He is the ideal person. And it's interesting that I'm wondering if we almost have to, it's almost like Abel was also a sacrifice. Maybe not to God, but it was a sacrifice to something.
In a way, he sacrificed his potential.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're sacrificing our potential when we don't create the proper sacrifices that we need to in our life.
Absolutely. Yeah, and essentially Abel is a model of how Cain should be conducting himself. Mm-hmm. He is making adequate sacrifices, and that is why his life has been so fruitful for him. So Cain should be idolizing Abel, not being envious of him and not hating him because God likes him as opposed to himself. He should be trying to emulate him to a certain degree. You know, things are going his way. Things are going the way that he wants them to. Why? What can I do to replicate that outcome? What is he doing? Maybe I should do something similar. But instead, he kills him. And I don't know if that is out of pure anger or if it was because maybe in his mind, eliminating this better example would make him kind of higher on the totem pole, so to speak. You know, like getting rid of this fantastic example of model behavior gets rid of the comparison to him being as lackluster as he is.
Yeah, instead of trying to sacrifice to propel ourselves, we kill that ideal so that we don't feel like we have to achieve that.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. You're instead of just making the proper sacrifices that it really takes in order to become that ideal person, you know, just whatever to embody your ideal, you just eliminate the ideal because that's too hard. That's too much. And that's extremely destructive because what's the alternative? What else do you do?
What then do you have to look to? Well, then what's your ideal after that? After you've killed that ideal, what new ideal pops up? It's not going to be good.
Yeah, and I almost, in a way, I kind of draw parallels between the Cain and Abel situation to Judas betraying Jesus, and that Judas betrayed this ideal man, this embodiment of ultimate good, I think is how we put it before. And he was so disgusted with himself that he went and ended his own life. And my kind of analysis that I got from that was just that ultimately if you eliminate this idea of ultimate good that exists potentially within you, if you just get rid of that, then you are eliminating your potential for living a fruitful life. And I think that that's the main takeaway, or the main message meant to be taken away from the Cain and Abel story, is that if you eliminate this, the ideal version of you, this thing that you should be striving towards, something that God, your conscience, the world, reality, whatever, is satisfied with. If you kill that, the idea of that and the idea of pursuing that, you're cursed to just wander aimlessly and toil away at nothing because you have no potential. If you've eliminated that positive potential, that potential for a positive future by embodying that ideal you.
Yeah, what's going to fill that hole? I've definitely felt like the urge of Cain. Like I've looked at people and I've been envious of them and like, why is he so likable? It's like, seems like almost, it almost seems effortless. And in doing that, I'm blind to everything that it took for that person to become who they are, to become such a likable person. They had to make sacrifices. They had to become interesting. They had to become compassionate, whatever it may be, in order for people to be magnetized to them. And I look at that and I'm blind to that. When in that envy, I'm blind to what it took for them to get there. And so then I think, well, what the fuck? Like, why can't I just have that? I am blind to seeing that I also need to make sacrifices to be that magnetic person. Definitely, I can totally relate to Cain, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think that to a certain extent, everybody can. Everybody can most likely relate to the majority of, if not all, of these negative characters that exist in the Bible. Like we discussed whenever we were talking about... I can't remember if it was when we were talking about the It was, I think, when we were talking about the crucifixion, just that potential for evil that exists within everybody. And I think that Cain is meant to represent that kind of embodiment of embracing that evil that does exist within everybody, because everybody does have the capacity for evil, unless they have a literal genetic defect. It's just, you don't have things happen like the Holocaust or what happened to the natives or the gulag system within the Soviet Union. That doesn't happen because, a select few people are just born monsters. Mm-hmm. Those are people. They're regular people that have maybe embodied the idea of what it is to become a monster, but they weren't born that way. They were born with that potential, absolutely, but you don't get millions of outliers in one location like that. There are not that many. Like, everyone in the world, the majority of people have no capacity for evil, but it just so happens that in the 1930s and the 1940s, there were millions of them condensed into one location. That's not a coincidence. That capacity exists within you. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. Most people can most likely relate to Cain. I found myself relating a lot to Samson and just being driven by idiotic emotion and wrath, especially. I mean, you've been around me playing. I have a goddamn temper. And it's something I've been working on for quite some time, but I can absolutely find myself relating to Cain, Samson, even, Satan to a certain degree. That mm-hmm. capacity for, I'm going to be repeating myself, but yeah, just that capacity for ultimate evil and wickedness is within you.
Well, even like a recent interaction you had with someone from your past recently, like you had even stated, like, yeah, I actually there was some enjoyment out of instigating certain reactions.
Yeah.
Like that's
what that is.
Yeah.
And we met yesterday to just kind of discuss things and settle our differences and just make amends, make peace, let all of that go. And that felt really fantastic to do. And I'll say what I said to her yesterday when we were speaking about that. Like, after I stopped behaving like that and I just looked at how I had been acting for the past, several hours, I guess it would have been, I felt genuinely disgusting. And that I felt like that was an embodiment of devilish behavior.
Well, you feeling disgusting, it's like Judas hanging himself almost.
Almost.
Your ideal, because the ideal you would have conducted every single thing in a empathetic way or whatever, like in a Jesus-like way. Mm-hmm. And that disgust, that's so interesting. That disgust is Judas hanging himself.
Ultimately, in a way, yes. And I don't think that it quite reaches the same magnitude because while I did absolutely just betray my better self 100% in that scenario, that is what I did, and that is why I felt so gross about it. Especially because we've been talking about this, which has just caused, a lot of self-reflection.
That's
which I'm
awesome.
Already prone to, So it's just kind of like, especially when I do something shitty like that, it's just kind of sensory overload. Like, God damn, that was really fucking shitty of me. But I would say it's not, while I did betray that better version of myself, I would say I did not do it in such a profound way that it was, in fact, unredeemable.
Right.
But I think that Judas could absolutely be, we could draw that parallel between that scenario and Judas feeling absolutely disgusted with himself to the point where he had to hang himself because, and I think the conclusion that at least I came to, I can't remember if you agreed on this, was that betraying that idea of ultimate good just ruined your life, and so hanging yourself is symbolic of just the end of possibility of a good life, because that's more impactful in a story, death, as opposed to unfulfillment.
Sure.
But I don't think that it quite reached that level, thankfully. Very, very thankfully.
That's awesome, though, that that's fucking great that you guys, came to that peace a little bit. That's fucking
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it really does genuinely feel good to just to make peace and to just let go of anger, which is something that I have always struggled with. I mean, even I can't really think of how young my anger really started becoming a prominent issue, but young, teenager at the latest, maybe even a little bit before teenager. And it's just always, if I get angry, it's hard for me to let that go. So, for 2 years of anger to just be gone, it's a strange feeling of like peace and calm that I'm almost unfamiliar with and didn't really know how to handle when I woke up today. I was like, am I depressed? Why do No, I'm just empty, calm. I'm just fine. This is weird, but I like it. It's very interesting, but yeah.
That's you are maybe at the latter end, but like you're the Israelites in the desert after being freed from the Pharaoh. Like the Israelites are, maybe not to such an extent, but like they're lost in a sense, and they're like figuring out what's going on here. Like what is, like, just like you, like what is this emotion that I'm feeling? And like, am I depressed? What is it? Like you're figuring that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whenever we were talking about that, I specifically brought up the point of operating under a mode of anger. If you've been if you've been using, say, anger as a motivation for a long time, like losing that is confusing because it's like, what now?
What do you replace that with?
Exactly, and even though it's absolutely beneficial to get rid of anger, of course. It still just kind of leaves you questioning, like, well, yeah, like you said, what now? What do I replace that with? And it's it is a bit just like wandering, lost and confused in the desert to a certain extent. Yeah.
Wow, that's profound. That's fucking congratulations. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really happy to hear that. Seriously happy to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy for it. It was just a very pleasant interaction, and I'm obviously not happy with my behavior last week, but ultimately it did lead to something very good, which makes me think of Samson in a way as well, and that he was just fucking up left and right and being chaotic and letting his anger take control of him, eventually to achieve some goal that God did want him to achieve.
Yeah.
Not quite the same, but on a very basal level, it does kind of make me think of that to a certain extent.
Yep.
It's like this terrible behavior did ultimately lead to something good.
Yeah, you have to go through that, like, and there's probably plenty of stories in the Bible about that. Like,
I was going to say, I'm sure we'll come across something that is going to bring us back to this discussion and just think, this is a better parallel than Samson.
Yeah, definitely. Huh. It's like, in thinking about the Bible, I'm starting, just from us talking here now, I'm starting to think, like, every single character and every single story in the Bible is some form of human emotion. Like, replace Samson with X emotion within ourselves. Like, and I think the writers of the Bible originally, that was their goal in writing it. Like, these are all the things that humans are going to go through in their mind to start. Mm-hmm. This wrath, this not making sacrifices, the sacrificing, sloth. Like, every single thing in the Bible is something either at some point some human being is going to confront and experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just thinking of say Jonah, for example, representing, I would say, maybe not full-on cowardice, to a certain degree. He was afraid, which, even if he was rightfully so, I think you could still classify that as cowardice, even if it is justified cowardice. I absolutely do believe that, a lot of these characters are just meant to symbolize general emotions that we are going to feel, beyond the general types of situations and circumstances that they find themselves in because of those emotions that they're experiencing and those actions that they're perpetrating because of them.
Absolutely. I'm going to reset the cameras.
I was
and
just
then-
going to say, Before we circle back, we never went over the phrase key, which I think we touch on real quickly.
Yeah.
So why don't we go separate?
Yep.
Just because our idea of heaven and, well, not heaven, I think our idea of hell is just
Slightly
slightly
off,
different.
Yep.
So-
So our key currently as it stands is God, Jesus, and heaven and hell. So anytime we say heaven or anytime we say God or anytime we say Jesus, we're consider this key. So for me, God is consciousness, or the conscience, your principle, your highest moral compass, which is, we're on the same page with that.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I'll let you say yours.
Yeah,
completely.
I'll just go through all of
Yep.
mine after you're done.
Yep. So conscience, principle, highest moral compass, that is God. So when I say God, replace that word with any of those three words or a mix of those three words. When I say Jesus, it is the human embodiment of God. It's the human embodiment of acting out on your principles, acting out your highest moral compass, acting out your conscience. And even Disney, kind of knew that. Like Jiminy Cricket, JC, was the conscience of Pinocchio, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But and then when I say heaven and hell, heaven I think is achievable on earth, and that is brought up in the Bible often. Like the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven is here on earth. You can find that whenever you act accordingly with your higher moral compass. And when you're in a state of peace, when you're in a state of real love, you are, to me, in heaven. I'm not saying people have to believe this way. This is just like what I'm starting to think. And then this is where maybe we slightly differ, but hell, I think you can be in hell anytime you are acting out sin, maybe, acting not in accordance with your higher moral compass. So anytime you feel envy for someone, in that envy, I think you are in hell, because you cannot be fulfilled when you are envious of something, because you are looking for something more. So for me personally, I think you're in hell whenever you are any of these things: envy, greed, whatever it may be.
Okay. And is that everything?
That's everything. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to start off by saying I don't completely disagree with that. I think that once you reach a certain level of feeling one of those 7 deadly sins, like greed or envy, wrath, all of that stuff, once you reach a certain point, I think that, yes, that is you being in hell. I just think that there's levels to it. If you're slightly envious of somebody being in like a better social standing than you, I don't know if that, for me, automatically would categorize as being in hell. But if you become extremely envious to the point that you are just constantly racking your brain over the fact that I don't have what this person has and I want it, and why don't I have it? Why God? Like, I think once you reach that point, that's when I would say I agree with you on the 7 deadly sin aspect. But just starting from the top for me, the biggest key for me is that I don't think that the Bible was ever meant, and we agree on this.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't think that the Bible was ever originally meant to be interpreted as things that literally happened by the people that wrote the book. We think that they meant for people to take these stories as parables. They wanted you to read them, think about them, and take some sort of grand message away from them. Even if not a grand message, some of them might just be smaller, little tips on how to just live your life properly. It doesn't even have to be a grandiose thing. Just how to not be a detriment to the people around you, how to live a fulfilling life yourself, how to not make the lives of other people any more difficult than they need to be, because life is difficult. Life is suffering, and you don't need to contribute to that for anybody else. That's what they wanted us to take away from this. They didn't want us to think that miracles were happening and that people were living to be 1,000 years old.
Having 60 children.
Having 60 children until the age of 900. I don't think they wanted us to think that. My idea of God, Satan, Jesus are all pretty much 100% in line with yours. I think that God is just meant to represent your conscience, your highest possible mode of operation, the voice in your head that guides you towards that. Anytime you have a decision to make, one option is better than the other. the voice in your head telling you to follow the better option is God. The voice in your head telling you to follow the worse option is Satan. If you are constantly following that God voice in your head, let's just call it, we'll stop doing, long words for it. We'll just say God and Satan now. I don't care. So if you're following the God voice 100% of the time, or at least the majority of the time, you can end up in heaven on earth. You can attain a level of peace and properly earned satisfaction if you have actually put in the work and made the sacrifices necessary to do so. Likewise, if you live your life in an overall negative way, a way that is harmful to yourself and others around you, or even just not productive and offering no benefit, even just dead neutrality. You are just dead in the water, not making progress. I think that's when you start to end up in hell. When you're not making any progress up or down, that might be more of a purgatory state. But once you get to the point that you have just been living so negatively that you are suffering for it, you're alone, you're miserable, you're not in control, that's hell. And you can absolutely go to hell in real life. That is a real place. Anybody that has experienced deep, deep suffering will tell you hell is real. You can go there. You can also get out. That's something that we touched on last time that's key. Once you get to one, you're not stuck there. You can go to heaven and then fuck off and be terrible and then leave. Likewise, you can fuck up a lot and end up in hell and then redeem yourself. So those are the key points. And then just as far as Jesus goes, I think that Jesus is meant to symbolize somebody that did actually follow the God voice 100% of the time. Like the Old Testament set out the guidelines. Jesus is an example of somebody always following the guidelines.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome, yeah.
And then we're kind of questioning the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, we're figuring that out.
one out.
That one's a little trickier.
It is.
Cool.
But anyway, circling back to Cain and Abel.
I'm going to think out loud here. Mm-hmm. Cain was a tiller of the fields or whatever, right? Crops. And God says the earth is soaked with your brother's blood, something to that extent that you will never be able to forget.
Yeah, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground, I think is what he said.
Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground.
And that is significant because he is a tender of crops.
Yeah.
Which I didn't immediately make that connection, so I'm glad you caught that.
Yeah, and I don't even know where to go with this. Like, it does seem significant. I don't know what else to say. I'm trying to think without too much blank space here, but
sure, yeah, and maybe it's just meant to really hammer it home that what he did was extremely detrimental, not just in a general sense, but even to what he was doing specifically. It's like you are a tender of crops, and now you have tainted the ground in which you grow those crops with your own blood. How could you possibly expect this to work out for you? Mm-hmm. Like you have cursed the ground which you are meant to work with your actions.
Yes.
And this, I absolutely think this is what God meant when he said sin, something along the lines of sin is a creature lurking at your door, waiting to take control of you, and only you can subdue that beast. Or well, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something along those lines. Sin is at your door, and it's up to you to keep that under control. And he did not. Absolutely didn't. And that, I think the sin, the proverbial sin waiting at the door is just that resentment, and that resentment potentially leading to rash action, like murdering your brother, or in this case, just killing off the idea of your ideal self that you should be striving for. And that's, I think, why he is cursed forever, which we need to go too deep into that. We already talked about that. I think it's very interesting also that God makes it a point to curse him in such a way, or mark him, rather, in such a way that anybody who kills him will be cursed 7 times over. I don't know if that it might be, the reason might be twofold. Maybe it's because, first of all, he wants to end the cycle of killing, just spitballing there. I also think that it's mainly to ensure that he does actually have to endure his punishment and suffer. I'm struggling with what the real world connection would be there.
Well, this maybe the Bible wasn't necessarily referencing this, but I can draw a parallel. Prison. I mean, you get sent to prison, yes, to be punished, but also so that retaliation doesn't just keep happening outside of that system.
Sure.
If you don't go to prison, you're gonna, retaliation. You killed one, they're gonna kill 2 of yours. You're gonna kill 4 of theirs. If the prison system was not set in place, that would happen like to such a scale that would be endless, maybe.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you said that they would specifically, you killed 1 of ours, we'll kill 2 of yours. Yeah, and that is often the way that a game of revenge can unfold. You did something to me that was a 10 out of 100, let's say. So I'm going to do something to you that's a 15 out of 100. Okay, well, I'm going to do something back to you that's a 25 out of 100. All right, well, how about 40 out of 100? And then we start breaking past 100. And I think that did you have something to...
quick example, if you don't mind.
No.
Like, let's say someone steals $2 from me, and we don't even have to take it to the killing extent. Someone steals $2 from me. Well, I'll feel completely justified in stealing $4 from them because you've already broken that trust boundary.
Yeah.
Like, you've already broken that boundary. So I will tag you as an evil person in order to justify me taking from you. And in making you an evil person and justifying that, I don't have to feel as bad about that. And it's like a mechanism that we put in place ourselves so that we can feel okay and we don't feel like we are mutually evil now. Yeah,
demonizing them as opposed to, demonizing them in a way that justifies your actions as opposed to just recognizing, wow, what they did was wrong. I shouldn't do that to people.
Definitely. And you see that now in politics. Like, you're a Trump supporter or you're a Biden supporter. Well, if I make out what Biden or Trump's objectives are to be evil, I am justified in anything towards the opposite party, let's say. You see that play out in many different aspects.
Yeah, it's almost demonizing the other side. With the politics thing, that's a difficult one. I really don't understand the demonization of the other side when it comes to political issues. I don't understand it. Like, why do you have to demonize the other side in order to justify your own beliefs?
I think, and maybe it wasn't like this always, but I think our political beliefs are so synergized with our identity now. And our identity is everything that we are. If my identity is good or evil, I think it's just so tied into our identity that's why, to a certain extent.
That could be, yeah, and people might almost take it as a personal attack when people disagree with them, especially if they're taking that moral high ground and saying, well, I am not only correct in my belief, but I am morally and virtuously correct. So anybody that believes different is evil.
Yeah, if you disagree with my political belief, because it's tied to my identity, you're disagreeing with me as a human being.
Yeah, and so I almost think that in that scenario, the demonization of the other people is more a result of that, I don't know, just over... What just being too connected to your political ideas and over integrating that into who you are as a person.
Yes.
You know, I think that once you start taking that moral high ground with your beliefs, I mean, your beliefs are your beliefs. You can't really make an argument that a lot of political issues are either correct or incorrect. They're valid points from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's damaging to make those things a part of your identity because
Absolutely.
you're just making questionable issues a part of your identity, thus making yourself questionable, not solid, less whole in a way. And, I mean, beyond that, like, is it worth the energy?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But yeah, I think that just the fact that anybody that harms Cain will be punished 7 times over is very interesting, and I still struggle with making that real world connection. I think you're on to something there.
Mm-hmm.
Why would the person that punishes them punishes? Maybe it is just an anti-revenge message. Like, revenge doesn't make anything better. It doesn't undo the wrong that has already been done. It only brings you into this terrible mix of this cycle of vengeance. All it does is suck you into this evil situation. It doesn't right any of the wrong that has already been done.
Absolutely. I mean, 100,000%. 100%. The good, it's Stannis Baratheon says this in Game of Thrones. The good, what does he say exactly? The good doesn't, something to the extent of the good doesn't make up for the bad, nor the bad make up for the good. Your bad actions are bad actions, and your good actions are good actions.
They stand alone.
They stand alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm. Yeah. Interesting. No, yeah, I like that. And I do think that's true to a certain extent. You know, just because you, let's say, we were talking about existing within heaven and being able to leave that state of heaven or hell. If you've been thriving for a long time and behaving as a good person, a fall from grace doesn't undo all of the good that you've done. Mm-hmm. It just damages your future. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
affect the past.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to separate, like, if I had been doing bad, I can still redeem myself in good actions, and I can do those. Those bad actions still affected someone negatively. Just because now I have redeemed myself doesn't mean that that's redeemed, that's taken away the bad that has been caused to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, improving upon yourself does not absolve you of the wrong that you have done. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely good that you have improved, and that's all you can do is keep moving forward and try to do better, but that doesn't mean that you are now justified in what you did in the past. It doesn't fix what you did in the past. It's just the reality that you have now. And ultimately, you just need to focus on being as good as you can be now and moving forward in order to prevent yourself from doing anything like you did again that would have, been more in
Mm-hmm.
that hell-conducive lifestyle.
Yep. Yeah. Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on. Well, any other insights?
No, I don't think so. No, I think that's really all I can take away from Cain and Abel right on its face. Yeah, just don't kill the potential for being better. Even if it seems a lot harder than just being the person that you currently are. It will seem very difficult to shed off the just shittier aspects of you if you're used to existing with them and operating according to those shitty tendencies, but the alternative is much worse and much more difficult to deal with in the long run.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel.
Next up,
The flood,
The flood.
And the wickedness in the world leading up to it.
all right.
Yep.
See you on the next one.
We'll see you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.